Sean, you're on.
Hello, everyone. Hope everyone is enjoying their noontime or morning time conversations, or if you are in overseas, an afternoon cocktail, perhaps. I think I'm going to go ahead and kick us off just to make sure we can get into the content. So thank you, everyone, for joining today's session on landing a board seat with longtime member and previous leader within IERG, Mike Lorelli. I'm excited to be here with Mike and to share this topic that gets a lot of attention within IERG. It's a fan favorite, so to speak. To kick us off, just to go into some of the agenda here, we'll get through some blocking and tackling so we can focus on Mike and his presentation. Just to make sure that, if you wouldn't mind, put the presentation in view mode and then mute yourself so we don't hear barking dogs. I will do the same because I'm sure my dog will bark. And then as it relates to Q&A, use the chat. You can chat me directly or put them into the everyone selection so that everyone else can see them. And as it relates to, we'll address the questions at either key points in the presentation or at the end. We have left some good time to address those at the end. So please put them in and I'll help manage that. So again, just ping me directly. Briefly, a little bit on myself. I'm the co-chair of the Connecticut chapter with Richard Guha. Many of you know him. He is a good friend and a great co-chair. I recently joined Accenture's marketing transformation team. Prior to that, I had worked in creative and production agencies, and for much of my career worked with Latin America. There are two people on the line who were a big part of that: Edgardo Tetamanti as a client and Dexter Dwight as an agency partner, both of whom I've considered mentors throughout my career. So great to see you guys. Getting into it here, I've covered off the presentation requests. So for those of you who have joined as a guest, particularly Bennett Vummer and Minerva Saez from Miami. We look forward to engaging with you and hopefully you'll join the ranks soon. But IERG is a very diverse group of multicultural international executives. And we're a mixture of members that are originally from many, many places. To name a few: Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Jamaica, the Netherlands, Spain, Sweden, and of course, the United States. And just to show some of that representation today, we've got folks from various markets around the world. What you can see here, one that's not listed is something close to my heart, which is La República de Miami, which is its own world. For those of you in Miami, you know what I'm talking about. IERG has chapters in major cities across the US, including Chicago, New York, Boston, Dallas, Florida, Miami, primarily, Dallas, Colorado, and the West Coast, California. And the main thing that we look to achieve here as members of IERG is really to expand our network, develop contacts, and potentially identify business opportunities. And part of today's conversation gets into that. So I'm going to keep moving us forward. Briefly, as we look at what's coming ahead at IERG, there's a lot going on, things still being scheduled across the country with different chapters. But just last month, John Zogby, American pollster, chatted with us about America being potentially on the brink of civil war. Later this month, Matt Hagman will talk to us about defining Miami's economic future. We'll have some in-person events between Connecticut and New York over the next couple of months. The virtual chapter is going to be putting on a great conversation. Wendy Peace from our Boston chapter will be chatting with us about connecting across languages. An expert in the field, she has a transcreation company. She's written a book on transcreation and marketing, available on Amazon. Pick your delivery network, but a good book to have and a quick read to get you up to speed if that's not something that you're familiar with, but you want your company to get into. Later in October, Christine Baird will be joining us to chat about cybersecurity and data privacy. I think she's on the line today, joining us from somewhere in France, I believe. And then later, right before the elections, John Zogby is going to come back to talk to us about how things are going, what he's hearing, what's the pulse of what's happening with the elections. All right, on to the today's business. To set us up on landing a board seat, the ecosystem in which we're all looking to operate, 18,000 private equity portfolio companies, potentially growing by the day, but on the public side, at the 500 million plus size, 3,600 and dwindling as they get gobbled up. As pre-flight reading, we shared some articles that Mike's written. And there's also available on the website an article that he also and included a few months back. So plenty of appetizers, so to speak. Let's get into the main meal. Before we can do that, of course, what makes Mike the right person to talk about this? Well, what hasn't he done? Two-time president at PepsiCo, interim CEO of multiple companies, board of directors, many different boards he sits on. He's master level certified across the NACD and the ACCD. He's also an executive coach. And today he'll be talking with us about how we can land board seats. Over to you, Mike.
Okay, great. And Sean, thanks for that really colorful introduction and welcome to everybody here. Actually, the most notable piece here is that getting to be a PepsiCo president twice was not the hard part. The hard part is trying to figure out how to navigate these toggles at the bottom of Zoom. So that's why we have Ruth. So my thanks to Sean for moderating today and also to Ruth, who certainly is our best supporting actress. So here we go. Now, there's like 60 slides in here, and we've got like 47 minutes. And the worst thing in the entire planet is when somebody puts up a PowerPoint slide and then proceeds to read it to you. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to give you the headline on each, and then Ruth is going to push out the PowerPoint. And really what you should do is at your leisure, pace through it at a more casual pace and drink in the content of the slides. So here's a rough snapshot of what our agenda is for today. Now, you're going to hear me use the expression many times. You've got to be able to give soundbite answers to questions. And the first question you want to answer for yourself, because you're going to be asked, is why am I doing this? Sean, you're traveling around the world. You're with Accenture. You're doing all this crazy cool stuff all around the planet, Latin America, here and there, whatever. You know, why do you want to add a board? You've got to have your soundbite answer. Now, by way of this slide, I give an example.
Are you you need to share first, Mike. Click share screen.
All right, hang on, Ruth. Hang on. I thought I had done that, and now it's not coming up, and we got to figure out why.
At the bottom of your page, you'll see the Zoom icon. Make sure you're looking at that so you can see share screen.
Yeah, I am not. So let me just do that.
And if you have issues, we have Sean. Oh, there you go, Mike. You're good. Let's get starting.
Is it full screen?
Not yet. Well, you have to actually pull up the presentation. We see your, just pull up the find your presentation again.
All right, hang on a second here. How about now?
Okay, and put it in your first slide mode section so that it's first page. There you go. And then put it in presentation mode.
Okay, give me just a second.
Okay, you're on fish where the fish are, so maybe pull up, go back.
I just need to find 10 seconds here to get to the full screen option. And I'm having trouble finding that, Ruth. So
okay, go backwards. You're moving forward. Your slides are in full screen. Just go back arrow.
Yeah.
There you go. Keep going.
Yeah. We should be
More.
here.
You on 5? Well, okay, there you go. Why are we doing this?
Yeah, but my problem is it's not showing full screen.
Oh, it is.
It is?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. Now, how about now?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So
Okay.
everybody on this call is familiar with the different kinds of boards. I'm not going to spend time on this. I happen to have a built-in bias toward private equity as a very explorable alternative. And it's for a couple of good reasons, which I'll get into. And one is the fact that Sean referenced. This was a terrific Wall Street Journal op-ed piece that appeared on October 17th of 2017. So that's 5 years ago. That commented on the fact that as of that date, there were only 3,600 companies left in the US with over 500 million in sales. Now, when most people saw this op-ed piece, they said, how could the Wall Street Journal, of all people, not have a fact checker? The number can't be 3,600. It's still 10,000. Well, guess what? The number was 3,600. Now, I still have the article. The gentleman who wrote it was head of research at Carlisle. It's on my to-do list to invite him to lunch someday, congratulate him on a phenomenal op-ed piece. But I also want to ask him, why did you not add one sentence at the end to say in that same 4 decades, when the public arena shrunk by way of all the M&A that Sean commented on, private equity quietly exploded to the fact that there are virtually, depending on whose count you use, 16,800 or 18,000 companies. So one of the reasons for my biases, if you're looking for boards, is that if you want to fish where the fish are, private equity is a good place to start. Here are the raw stats. And Ruth, just confirm that you've got my right slides up here.
Yes.
Okay, good. Now, demographics are important here because many people think that you need to be a CEO, a sitting CEO to get on a board. Not true. You know, when you look at the raw stats, you know, half, you know, are such sitting people, sitting CEOs and the like. And the average age is 61. That age actually comes down year by year. These are 2 important stats to think about. Here is the second of the 2 reasons I am very biased toward private equity. Now, my alma mater, PepsiCo, I cannot say enough good things about the training I got at PepsiCo. Absolutely phenomenal. But if PepsiCo is going to add an outside director because somebody's retiring or going off for conflict reasons or whatever, they're going to call Spencer Stewart and say, you know what? The candidates we want you to send us are probably the sitting CEOs of other Fortune 50s, meaning bring me the CEO of Reebok or American Express or Ford or somebody with a marquee last name like Alan Mulally from Ford, you know. Whereas the private equity sector says, we don't care about all that plastics. Can we just find 2 good people? So that's the other reason why I have a very, very strong warmth for the private equity market. Now, I'm going to tell you up front here, never use your traditional bio, your traditional resume. I'm going to show you what those differences might look like, but to kind of jump to the punch, boy, these are the 3 expressions that when I see this, when people send profiles to me, you know, I just about gag. Seasoned is an adjective best applied to dead meat that's about to get cooked. Please do not use this word. 35 years experience. You may be proud, but it basically tells me it took you 7 times longer to figure out what an IERG person can get done in a couple of years. So please avoid these terrible temptations. So let's go through the messaging step by step. Your board resume is different than your resume. And by the way, you do not need 2 documents. Constructed correctly, you only need 1 set of documents, 1 resume, which would say everything. Now, the nuances in a board resume, hang on, is that it's, hang on a second here, Ruth, I'm sorry, I just lost this here. Give me 1 second, here we go. Your usual resume talks about all your type A qualities, right? You made this acquisition. You eliminated a redundant plant. You laid off 1,000 people. And in the process, the G&A line, decreased by 1.5, which fell right to the EBITDA line. And that's terrific. And that's one of the reasons why you got engaged. However, when you're thinking about presenting yourself for boards, you want to be thinking more about your coaching skills, people that you mentored, people that you asked to mentor. Can you be nose in, fingers out, as the expression goes, meaning, can you ask inquisitive questions without sounding directive? So these are the kind of qualities that differentiate your resume when you're writing it for board purposes. Okay. Now, I also tell people a good recruiter who has an assignment is always going to have a slate of 4 or 5 candidates. All of them are going to be perfectly on the spec. So your mission in life is not to be perfectly on that spec, because being the perfect candidate on that spec actually against 4 other candidates who are also on that spec actually gets you nowhere. Your mission in life right now is to be the tallest duck in that pond. Otherwise, you're starting it in last place. So think about the things that would differentiate you from the other likely candidates. I spend a lot of time talking to people about LinkedIn. Most people have no idea how powerful LinkedIn has become. I'll just summarize it by saying no one in their right mind would ever take a New York City taxi cab if you could get an Uber for 2/3 the price. The car is clean, the driver is shaved that morning, et cetera, et cetera. And basically, LinkedIn has become the equivalent for the search profession. The old world of search is going the way of the dodo bird, the Hydra, Spencer Stewart's, Corn Ferries, Egon Zenders of the world. Wake up every morning, another bite's been taken out of their cheese. They're looking for some answer that's going to reverse this trend. And my only personal advice to them is there's nothing they can do to stop that tidal wave other than reread the book, Who Moved My Cheese? So here's my way of describing it. There are 700 million LinkedIn members, right? A good recruiter is going to spend an hour. He's going to say, you know what, I'll do a minute apiece combing through people's LinkedIn profiles. And unless you are in that top band, meaning you are killer, you might as well not have ever been born. You simply cannot be found, not because you're a bad person or a bad candidate or off the spec, but he's not going to comb through 2,000 resumes to go find you. So set your standard to be a killer LinkedIn profile. Absolutely nothing less. I'll give you a couple of tips. Okay. In my experience, and I've had a lot of fun reverse engineering the LinkedIn algorithm since they were born 22 years ago by these crazy kids up in Seattle. They deliberately do not publish an instruction manual, right? They don't, because they want you to figure it out on your own. They don't want to give away the secret sauce. I will tell you from my experience with LinkedIn, 80% of the effectiveness of the algorithm comes down to getting 2 things right. So that's not so bad. Get 2 things right, you get 80% of it licked. So what are the 2 things? Number 1 is the headline block. Notice mine, CEO, interim CEO, outside director, private equity, operating partner, board coach. Those are the things, if people are looking for those attributes, I would like to be found. And punctuation is important. It should be separated by these vertical bars, also known as spikes. Most people make the mistake of using forward slashes or commas. The LinkedIn algorithm has no idea what that means. Now I've exploded here, and here is where you could do some homework after today's session. This is my exploded LinkedIn profile. My about section begins with a very crisp, very short elevator speech, gets right to the point, tells people 90% of what they want to know about me. And then I've used this effective use of subheads to basically tell people where are the 3 or 4 or 5 things where Mike Lorelli shoots the lights out, and then go ahead and prove it. So as an example, it says accredited outside director as one of the subheads, independent director. Mike's track record has made him an attractive director as he brings Fortune 50 He's master's level at the NACD, and he's chaired 3 public company committees. Now, if someone caught my headline, which drew me into this equation, and then they read my opening elevator speech, and then this subhead, there is no way on the planet that I am not going to get a phone call. And I will tell you, of the 3 boards that I am on today, I've been on a lot of boards over the years, not the same 3 boards over all the years, different boards. But I will tell you, in today's world, 2 of the 3 boards that I get on, and I get a lot of phone calls, are because my LinkedIn profile is what I call sticky. It's got board stickiness. So this is a page you can slow down and read at your leisure to just take a look at one example, not suggesting what I've done here is right, but it is working for me. Value proposition, very important tool, right? You got to be able to convey very succinctly. So, Sean, you're a busy guy. You're going all around Latin America. You've done all this crazy stuff. Tell me why you want to go on another board. You've got to be able to give a very succinct answer. So in my own case, what I say if I get asked is, I bring a broad cross-section of skills, both from my Fortune 500 underpinning, as well as the smaller limited resource companies that I've run, very succinct, very to the point. And then when it comes down to a particular interview where I can tailor the speech a little bit, here's an example. I got called by Falconhead Capital. I just acquired Reed's Italian Ices, and I read in the press release they had interest in going outside the US. Yet none of the bios that I read from their operating partners suggested they had any international background. So in each of my conversations, I was ready. I was ready. If they said to me, Mike, why should we pick you? I would have said, you know, I think I could add a lot of value to the Reader's Board because I know both QSR, quick service restaurant, and international, and I could be a good sounding board to the CEO as he's thinking about building the footprint. So in effect, what has Mike said with that soundbite answer? He said 3 things. Number 1, he knows QSR, and by the way, Falconhead didn't. Number 2, he knows international. By the way, Falconhead didn't. Number 3, if he gets a call from the CEO of Rita's about how to crack the code in the Middle East or Eastern Europe or wherever else, Mike's probably going to give this guy an hour on the phone, the equivalent of a $100,000 McKinsey study for free. This is our guy. He belongs at the top of the list. So that's what I mean by a value proposition. You need to do one in generalist terms. And then for each specific interview, when you know the company, you can be a lot more specific. Now, I want to add a point. Never end a conversation, an in-person or a Zoom conversation, where you are being interviewed by saying, Ralph, thanks for your time. I learned a lot by way of your questions. I hope I'm your candidate. That is what I call a flat soda. Okay. If the person does not give me the opening, I end the meeting by saying, Ralph, thanks for your time. I learned a lot by the questions you asked me. But what I'd like you to remember about Mike Lorelli is I know QSR, I know international, and I could be a good sounding board to the CEO. 3 very powerful statements. Getting on that first board, okay, this is sometimes difficult. And here's where I suggest nonprofits are very valuable. Some people think you should look down upon nonprofit boards. Absolutely not the case. If you look at any prominent CEO's bio, you'll always see that he is on a nonprofit board. So this is something that absolutely belongs in your vocabulary. I actually enjoyed this piece from NACD's manual last year, where they basically said, if you're looking for diversity, one of the ways to define diversity is people that have no board experience whatsoever. So put that in your hat for you people who carry an inferiority complex because you're not on any boards. Okay. Next, I want to move on to getting to the market. Think of it as the push-pull strategy. You want to make your availability known to anybody who might hear about a board seat. Now, this is kind of interesting. When I do this in front of a public audience and I encourage them to interrupt me as I go along, I always get a question because you put 50 CEOs in a room and do a Saturday morning, conference for 3 hours and encourage them to interrupt. Well, guess what? They do. And one of the ones I get is, hey, Mike, this is interesting, but give me examples of the right audiences. I don't know if I know 50 such people that I should let know that I'm interested in boards. And I say, well, this is actually pretty simple. Everybody you know who's a CEO, a CFO, everybody you know who's on a board, every law firm you've ever engaged, all the audit firms you've worked with, your personal accountant, all the recruiters you've worked with one way or another, they've presented you, you've hired them, industry colleagues, former bosses, and yes, subordinates. Somebody you hired 15 years ago as a junior level lab technician, and now they're EVP of XYZ Semiconductor, and they're on the board. That person belongs on this list. So this is just a good sampling of people. I doubt if anybody on this IERG call could not come up with a good quality list, a list of 50 people to let know that you're interested in boards. Now, the next question I get is, Mike, I don't have the personality to do this. I can't pick up the phone and call somebody I haven't talked to in 10 years and letting them know I'm on boards. And I say, you know what? It's actually not that complicated, but you got to get to the point. And what you might do is call up Jim and say, hey, Jim, I know it's been years since we've caught up. Hope you're doing well. I looked at your LinkedIn profile and it looks like you're still with Alpha Tech. Good for you. Hey, I'm calling for a selfish reason. At this juncture in my life, I'm making a serious effort to get on a couple of good boards. I know you're the kind of person who from time to time might hear about board openings. Man, I'd be flattered if you threw my name in. In fact, I'm going to shoot you my bio just so you have it handy. Very good ice-breaking way to have a conversation with someone you haven't spoken to in a long time. Don't waste their time. Get right to the point. You are calling for a selfish reason. Now, one of the reasons why I don't want anybody to throw this PowerPoint away is this is a good laundry list of questions to have your soundbite answers ready the night before you go in. These are the kinds of questions that you would get asked. Example, what committee are you best suited for, least suited for? I'll give you my answer here. When I get hit with this question, I say, you know what? Good question, 3 things. Number one, I've served on audit, but by no means am I qualified to be the audit chair. I understand SOX, but not well enough. Number 2, I have served on several compensation committees. In fact, I've chaired several compensation committees. But number 3, more importantly, is what does the CEO want to do with me? I understand service to the Queen. So what I've just given you is Mike Lorelli's soundbite answer. I am not suggesting that my answer works for you. I am suggesting that you look at this list of questions the night before you go in, have your soundbite answers ready. Now, I like this list better. Questions for you to ask, okay? Because these are good questions that simply asking them demonstrates your board prowess, right? Your purpose is not to show up at board meetings having read the book and prepped with 3 or 4 good quality questions. You are there to serve the CEO. And the best way you could serve a CEO is for him to perceive you as a coach, somebody he can call confidentially on a Saturday when he's stuck and he wants another opinion. So as an example here, if you ever said this to a recruiter, what's the best way that I could be perceived as a coach to Sally, the CEO? What's the best way I could have Sally comfortable with me? I got to tell you, if you ever said this to a recruiter, you would go to the top of that recruiter's list in a heartbeat. All right. I'm also building your credentials. There are several groups you can go to get an education on all these board fundamentals. Sean mentioned NACD, the most popular American College of Corporate Directors, another popular one, many in Europe that I can count. I'm not going to walk you through them, but I've listed the URLs here. Excuse me. Each of them gives you fancy language, which goes in the proxy statement. This gets read by a lot of recruiters That's where they collect a lot of their inventory, so to speak. Good place to be represented. Now, here is one of my favorite tools, and that is doing a skills map. Take the time, and this takes days. Map out what skills you think XYZ needs to be successful, and where they have got credentials in place and where they may have gaps. I used the example earlier, of Rita's Italian Ices bought by Falconet, where they had ambition to go overseas, and yet none of the guys had any international experience. And I uniquely fit that bill. So what I did in this particular case was I did a skills map for a company. This is a different example. AeroGrow, a company out in Phoenix, who called me out of the blue, found me on LinkedIn. And I said, you know what? On the x-axis, left to right, I'm highlighting the skills I think you people need to be successful in the marketplace. And then on the y-axis, I'm slotting in names, either VPs or board members that have that skills. And obviously what I'm hunting for is yellow boxes where I think you may have a void in your skills makeup at the board level. In this particular case, the chairman in one press release said, you know what? Someday we want to go retail. We're today only an internet company. Yet I couldn't find anybody by way of their experiences from their LinkedIn profiles that had any experience calling on a retailer. Whereas when I was EVP of Pepsi, that was my job description. I called on the retailers. So let me slide over to the right, where the chairman also mentioned in another press release, someday he wanted to go outside the US, but I couldn't find anybody with any international experience on the board or at the VP level. Hence, I created this yellow box. And then a little bit, fortuitously here, I slide in my own name, Mike L., where I can help fill those skills gaps. In the case of calling on retailers, Mike L., that's me. In the case of expanding outside the US and into the international arena, I highlighted that box, put in my name, Mike L. So it's a very powerful tool. It takes a few hours to do the homework to figure this out. But I got to tell you, if you ever use this, either verbally, it could be you used it on a Zoom call, or it could be you used it as a handout in a meeting. Very powerful. At the end of the day, I've given you lots of thoughts. They will choose you because of three things. They like you, they feel they can trust you, and they sense you are dependable. These are the three most important things to communicate in terms of the way that you answer the questions that they ask you. Now, DNO, most of you are familiar with what this is all about. I won't bring this up because many people get tempted to go on these, smaller startup boards, where the CEO is a genius, 180 IQ. He knows DNO is important. He doesn't have it right now. Someday he's going to get around to it, but right now he's worried about paying the electric bill on Monday. So he hasn't signed up DNO. Do not go for a company that doesn't have DNO. Ask for an electronic copy of the policy. If you don't understand the language, hire a consultant who does understand DNO and use this person to shoot holes in it for you. All right, fit matters. I don't think I need to tell anybody at the IERG the importance of fit. What's particularly important today? Sure, sitting CEO, sitting CFO, all those fancy schmancy titles, they will always help. But by the way of the stats I showed you earlier, only 50% of the people fall in that bed. Women and diversity, this is unbelievably embarrassing. I mean, 10 years ago, 10% of outside directors were women. Today, that number is approaching 20. It should be 50. I personally am very committed to improving that stat on my own for the boards that I sit on. Board portals, there are many. I would say I view this a little suspect. I have yet to hear back from a client about landing a board assignment by way of a board portal. So I say this with caution because they're very anxious to take your money and promise you a certain number of leads, but keep in mind when you post your answer to that lead, there's probably 500 other people that applied. Interview prep, read everything. Now, the easy part is if it's a public company, because usually on the investor relations section of their website, they still have the last playback. So you can listen to the CEO and the CFO talk shop, talk about the competitors, the lingo, the terminology, all that good stuff that's otherwise very difficult to learn. So it's easy for a public company, but I will insist that even for a private equity portfolio company, it's amazing if you Google it, how much you could find. Any chance that you get to show your own visibility. I author a lot of articles. I know Ruth pushed out a couple, and she will push out the deck after today's presentation. Let me do a fast time check. Ruthie, how are we doing on time here?
You're good. It's 12:38. You've got time.
Good. All right. Board roles. Do not make the mistake of waiting until you're 61 or 61 and a fraction. I can't tell you how many people I take on as a client. They're 62, they're 63, and they're thinking to themselves, hey, world, I'm a big kahuna. These are the fancy companies I've worked for. These are the big titles I've had. I'm now ready for board seats. The line can start forming at my left. It does not work that way. You are going to be outgunned by other people the recruiter presents that has more board experience than you do. You really should be starting on this in your 50s. Next steps, I tell people patience is a virtue. For some strange reason that I still can't figure out, if I lose a CEO at one of my companies, back when I was an operating partner in Falconhead, man, I had to fill that job today. If I lost the CFO, man, I had to fill that job today. If I lost the CFO, the CMO rather, man, I got to fill that job. I'll get around to it this week, but I'm busy today. I'll get around to it on Thursday. Well, boards unfortunately behave the same way. There's no immediacy toward filling board seats, and this is something that you have to deal with. It helps having the visibility, getting the D&O insurance, and all these other things that we've talked about before, but expect it'll take you a good year to land yourself on a couple of good boards. My last step, and my favorite by far, is step 6, have fun with it. If you're having fun with it, meaning the pursuit of boards, it's going to show, and it's going to show to the other people that you meet with, the recruiter, other people on the candidate slate, other people they might fly in, other outside directors. But if you're having fun with it, odds are that you're going to be better with it. I can't give you any better advice than that. Couple of final slides, just to remember that they are in the deck. This is a very good comp table published 2 years ago by Perlmeyer. So when you get a term sheet from a recruiter, there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, Ralph, I'm very flattered. And I enjoyed all the time I spent, with all the people on the 3 visits I made to Cincinnati. But when I looked at your term sheet, it looked a little bashful. Is there any room for negotiation? Now, that actually is the nicest way in the world that you can accuse them of being cheap, which is kind of a fun thing to do. And I've had several candidates tell me they actually have used these stats to go back and ask them to sweeten the bid. And guess what? That happened. Good chart to keep in mind. People ask me, how many boards can you sit on? I generally have been on 3. In all of those times, I have been the CEO of a company. Now, how do I do all that? Because number one, I insist on 100% meeting attendance. Well, I'm careful about what boards I'm going to go on. I live in Darien, Connecticut. I am no longer able to sit on West Coast boards because that means I'm going to kill a whole day flying to Seattle for a 6-hour board meeting, kill a whole day coming back. People reimburse you for your T&A, but not for your time. So I'm not going to do West Coast boards. I'm not going to do startups because I don't want a CEO taking my time on a Saturday saying, Mike, I can't make payroll on Monday. Do you have any ideas? Now, I might have some ideas, but personally, that's not the best use of Mike Lorelli's time. So I no longer do startups. My point is not that my criteria is the right criteria for anybody on this call. I am suggesting be selective. People say, hey, listen, is their present employer going to be a little miffed that you're draining off some time? Actually, the opposite is the case. Put outside director, independent director on your board, on your business card. Even if you're not on a board today, put independent director. And if someone says, hey, Charlie, it's very nice to meet you. By the way, I'm looking at your card. What board are you on? Your answer very simply should be something very candidly like, you know what? That's exactly the point. At this juncture in my life, I'm making a concerted effort with the help of IERG to get myself on a couple of good boards. Man, I'd be flattered if you heard of a suitable opening, if you threw my name in. So please take my card and put it in your Outlook when you get to the office. This is a terrific resource. If any of you feels underqualified for doing resumes, bios, cover letters, LinkedIn profiles. Yes, I am selling this woman. She's become quite a good friend of mine, but she does all of my work and she's made a night and day difference in everything that she's touched. My resume, my bio, my LinkedIn profile, the letters that I've written, etc. If you feel you need help, spend the money. Go out and pay the money to get it done right, and do not price shop. I'm guessing that if you go to get LASIK surgery, you're not going to go to the doctor who advertises $4.99 an eyeball. You're going to go to the best person. Karen Kirpin is my go-to resource. I've listed her resources here, and I apologize for going hoarse, which is actually timely because we are at the end. And I tell everybody here, connect with me on LinkedIn. I am what's referred to by LinkedIn as a super connector. I've got over 3,000 connections. Simply linked in with Mike Lorelli and being a second contact to those other 2,999 improves your own ratings as people do a query. So please, by all means, send me a LinkedIn invite. If you put IERG in the subject line, I will accept it immediately. And with that, Sean, we've got time for Q&A, and Ruth will tell us how much time we have.
Thank you, Mike. We've got about 15 minutes. Anyone open it up for questions? Anyone got some questions? Actually, I've got one while folks are gearing up to come off mute. Mike, you've offered so many tips. Which one's the most powerful?
Yeah. So, Sean, the answer today is a very easy answer. In today's world, where LinkedIn is basically taken over the search profession, the single best thing you could do is to close your door, don't answer the phone, don't do emails, don't feed the dog, let the dog bark all at once, fix your LinkedIn profile. It's the single most important thing you could do. When I take on a new client, I always ask them two questions up front. Number one, how good is your resume? And they usually say, you know, Mike, I think it's pretty good. And I say, you know what? I looked at it too, and I think you're right. How much time did you spend on it? 50 hours. And I say, you know what, Ralph? It shows. This is a quality resume. Then I ask my question number two, how good do you think your LinkedIn profile? Well, the answer is usually pretty wimpish. Something like, you know, I think it's okay. How much time did you spend on it? I spent 2 or 3 hours. I know I got to get around to spending a little bit more time on it. And I grab that person by the throat, pictorially, figuratively, you know, not literally. And I say, you get your world upside down. If you're in transition, I would tell you, close your door, stop feeding the dog, fix your LinkedIn profile, take the next 29 days of the month off. You'll be in better shape than all the networking that you're doing. That's my number one tip, Sean, by far.
Great, thank you. All right, those on the line, any questions?
Hey, Mike, this is Julio Ramirez. I'm a guest, first time with the program. I got a little bit of the, when you made the comment about the age for getting on the board, I felt the cold water bucket falling on me, but I opted to work in senior level roles, including CEO of BurgerFi up until last December. And most of the companies I worked for did not allow me to be on a separate board, or either explicitly in a policy or told to my face. So at 68, I'm throwing, I don't want to throw the white flag up yet, but I do get enough annual reports to know that once in a while, maybe 10% of the time, you'll see somebody even in their 70s on the board, but they're far and few between. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And just to see if I should just throw the white flag up or still give it a shot.
Yeah. So Julio, that is the most beautiful question you could possibly ask of me. And I want to give you my perspective on this. And I really appreciate your courage in putting this out there. First of all, I have been very lucky, I will say lucky / blessed, to have been on 3 boards since I was 36 years old, not the same companies at the same time, but on 3 boards. And I told you my best tool is my LinkedIn profile. I will tell you though, my motivations of being on boards are twofold. Number one, the intellectual engagement of getting out of my sandbox. Man, do I love hopping on a plane, flying down to Atlanta, immersing myself in some company's strategic plan, the issues they're facing, and I give them my 2 cents, and they really appreciate it, and they elicit it, and I know they listen to it attentively. You know, that gives me tremendous personal gratification. And when I get back home to Darien, Connecticut, 36 hours later, my cobwebs are all cleared. You know, it was so refreshing to get out of my sandbox. So I will tell you, that's my number 1 of 2 motivations. Now, don't ask me to rank my number 1 and my number 2, but my second motivation is the 1099 has certainly not hurt me any, and it's basically covered over all these years 2 of my hobbies, and I happen to have 2 very expensive hobbies. Number 1 is my airplane. The second is my significant other. Now, at some point in time, I will give up this day job stuff. At some point in time, I will. I am never going to give up the board reasons, the board seats that I sit on, because I will always enjoy the intellectual engagement. In fact, I go so far as to say being on outside boards, if you're retired, is probably the best preventative measure against getting dementia by keeping those neurons firing. Now, the thought I want to end with, because it's the reason why I loved your question so much, is I'm 71 years old, you know, and I'm still blowing and going on 3 boards, you know, and I have no interest in ever cutting that part of my life out. So does that help a little bit, Julio?
Yes. Yes, it does. Thank you.
Hey, Mike, Shannon DePietro. I was laughing. I was wondering if you were going to say you were going to get rid of your significant other because the plane and the significant other. But my question is this. I'm in the human resources field, and I'd like your thoughts on human resources professionals. Human capital seems to come up in many discussions in earnings reviews. Is there a trend of putting more HR people on boards? Thank you.
Yeah. Great question, Shannon. I'm very pleased that you asked that. I'm going to suggest a book that you at least look at the gentleman who wrote it, look at his website, if not buy and read the book. He was my mentor at Pepsi. His name is Mike Feiner, F-E-I-N-E-R. He wrote a famous book called The Finer Points of Leadership. And he's one of the most sought after, you know, directors that I know. And Mike is in his 80s.
Thank you very much. And my son works for PepsiCo and just got promoted today. So
God bless America. Congratulations to him. I'm sure you're proud.
That's great. Mike, we've got a question from Art. Is it worth investing in a custom electronic resume in parallel to LinkedIn?
Yeah. I'll give you a personal point of view, but you got to make your own decision here. I would say no. You know, the LinkedIn profile is just so much more important. than the resume is. The resume is so standard, and everybody's resume is pretty good. I would say it's probably not a good investment of the dollars, but I'm not the only person to ask, but it's a very good question. Nevertheless, I'm glad you asked it.
All right. Anyone else have a question for Mike?
Well, if not, Sean, I want to thank you personally for your leadership with IERG, pulling these meetings together, which are not easy, as we all know, but you do it for your love and your passion. I do encourage people, do send me a LinkedIn invite, put IERG in the subject line. I will accept it immediately. That's probably one of the best things you could do to accelerate, your rankings in the profiles.
Yeah, well, and back at you. I've really appreciated working with you and preparing for this presentation. Been very helpful and given some good guidance to me. And I'm on the shorter side of the time range, but I'm already behind. So you've given me some homework of my own to do, and I appreciate all the tips and suggestions that we've got here. And you're getting a lot of thank yous on the chat as people, I guess, move on to their next presentation. But there'll be a lot of reach outs on LinkedIn. So get ready.
Yeah. Well, terrific. Well, thanks very much for the opportunity, Sean and Ruth, for your behind the scenes best supporting actress role, and also, any of the others that helped make this come together. So I've enjoyed this just as much. Thank you all.
All right. Well, I think we may give you back a few minutes. Do reach out to Mike, connect directly, and register for those events that are coming up end of August in Miami. That's an interesting setup that I was reading and preparing for this, between global warming, or whatever you want to call that, and just the general economics of what's going on in Miami, which is exploding right now. That should be a great session. And I guess from that, we'll sign off, unless Fred, I see you're on. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mike and Sean. Great presentations, great learning experience with Mike. And Sean, I want to congratulate you for a fantastic job moderating the program. I think everybody has learned quite a bit. I've already seen a number of chats come up where a lot of people are interested in contacting Mike. And I'm glad that Shannon from San Diego is on the call, and it's great to see a face. I've been in contact with her over the last year or so with IERG activities, and so we welcome her aboard. And as Sean mentioned before, we have Bennett Brumer on the line, who was the public defender director of Miami-Dade. He had something like 450 lawyers reporting to him, and he's very active in the community. We have people from Duke Holness. I'd like to reach out and say hello. He's in Kingston, Jamaica. And again, we have people in different parts of the world attending this call. And as you know, IERG is an expat international business management group of people. And what's interesting is how much we all have in common when it comes down to meeting and looking for different opportunities, and also getting coaching and opinions from other international people, which is, I think, very unique compared to people who just have domestic US experience. So again, thank everyone, and kudos to Sean for a great job, and Mike, thank you again, and we're looking forward to you to come back. The New York chapter is going to have an event in a month from now, and we're counting on you to be our speaker there. So again, thank you so much, Mike, for your professionalism and your help and your advice. And
Pleasure, Fred. Thank you.
All the best to everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Fred.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye,
Have a
all.
good day.